So we just saw a beautiful demonstration of the application of Matrix with big T trauma. And as Carl had said, or one way that I help to describe the difference, I mean, as we say, we're dealing with trauma all the time, and we know the Uden aspects and the unexpected, dramatic, isolating, not resourced aspects of a trauma. The distinction between little t and big T traumas, you can't look in the DSM diagnostic manual for what's categorized under this or that, but one way that we often teach to make the distinction is all traumas have those qualities of a Uden. The difference is perception. In a little t trauma, Uden is there, and the perception of harm to my well-being is inherent in that, whether it's a 4-year-old that mom let go of the hand of in the mall, or whether it's a child that's asked to come to the front of the room to do a math problem on the blackboard. All of these things are perceptions, like, oh my God, right? It's that perception of I'm not going to make it through this. Big T trauma, the difference is there truly is the likelihood or the possibility of injury to well-being. So whether it's a car accident, a surgery, physical abuse, a rape, all the different things that we've been talking about, that's how we make the distinction between big T and little t. And on one hand, you say, what's the difference? Why does it matter? It's all perceived. But we've talked about in Matrix that we have different protocols for big T trauma. And big T trauma, we go to the end. And we go there, we don't start at the beginning and work our way through, because it's so critical at the end for them to know that they made it through. So I make that distinction. If it's helpful to use it, please do. Some of the other things that I just wanted to mention as far as working with trauma is also the way that the brain and the body respond to trauma is very different than other things. Negative events, as we've talked about, the body holds the way that the amygdala and the hippocampus and the way that the body stores trauma is different than bad memories. And it's why it's so important that we're tapping and using the body, because trauma comes in through the body and it gets released through the body. And it's the beauty of the tapping techniques that make it a somatic modality as well, a body-based modality for releasing the energy, emotion, trauma, and it's why it's such a critical piece. Some other things that I just wanted to say is Carl has emphasized over and over safety. Yeah, if you read any of the Bessel's work and Stephen Porges's work, all the greatest trauma innovators are talking about healing doesn't happen without safety. And I think we all know that to be true on an intuitive and personal level. One of the things that I just wanted a template for me, how I think about it, is when I'm working with a client, the safety that's created between me and the client is a template for what's going to happen in the matrix. So I'm ensuring all the things between us and here, between pre-framing, between the use of prosody of my voice, between the use of body language and how I'm asking open-ended questions and behaving towards them physically, and all of those things, all of those, from the first moment we have a consultation over the telephone, if that's what it is, or Skype, to setting up to that first session, to how I handle interactions, all of those are creating a sense of safety and rapport. And Penny's spoken to a lot of this in other applications, is I'm templating that safety because it's the most important thing. Safety is everything. And if I can keep everything, the more observant I am of the safety that I have between a client out here in the three-dimensional world, then the more likely that I'm going to reduce abreactions, the more likely I am to have emotional floodings and things like that, because that safety is so already established and then brought into the matrix. One of the things just that didn't get spoken as clearly is, for me, and this is just a personal ways, I always begin with a client personally doing EFT and tapping, or on very light matrix events at the beginning, just like Carl said. Even if a memory comes up about a big T trauma, I'm personally not going to go there in a first session. I'm going to put that on hold. I'm going to do whatever I need to safely put it aside and build up that kind of resilience and safety and rapport so that they have confidence that if they go somewhere challenging, they're going to be able to come out of it. But on a first session with somebody, they don't know that yet. They're hoping, they're thinking, they may not even be realizing it, but I'm setting up continually so that our rapport is deepening and deepening.
Right, in this environment, we're all experienced guys. We've all gone in and done the EFT and Matrix, so
great.
We can
go from there.
Big stuff.
Yep, got it.
I just don't have that, do they?
Yeah. So we have to be aware of our own boundaries and skill levels. I'm going to actually disagree. Somebody said that we only attract what we're ready for. I've just worked with too many practitioners that stepped out and didn't listen to it and went too quickly and dove right in too quickly and then got overwhelmed by a client's reaction that they didn't feel ready for. So I have a challenge with that. I think we have to always err on the side of safety. We always have to err on the side of boundaries. So for some of you, you all have your own ways as practitioners to prepare yourself for a session, energetically, on all the ways that you need to. I would say also that within a session as we move in toward trauma as well, and if we know that we're going into a big T trauma, personally, I like to also know some of the resources of a client so I know what they are to help be able to call them in, because sometimes they're echo and sometimes they kind of go blank, and it makes it easier to suggest not something that I'm guessing or thinking or making up in the moment, but we've already spoken about ahead of time. What are things that are really useful and soothing for you? What are things that are resources for you in your life early on in developing, so that when we finally hit a big T trauma, I've already got some of those to be able to say, just remember you've got your angel, remember you've got your cloak, remember you've got your whatever that is. And it's like, oh, great, thank you. So I've already got that established. When working with trauma, what I want to also say is, and was beautifully demonstrated, is that we want to also make the distinction of continual dissociation. Yeah, and we've already talked about that, because that's gentler and safer. And like Carl said, we were trying to avoid abreactions if possible, of course, but we deal with what happens. The other things, especially that I want to say in trauma, is when they're starting to get lost and they're maybe merging with echo, etc., that just like Caroline said, what is so important is me holding the ground. I'm like the life vest, the life raft for them. So I want to make sure that everything that I'm doing, my energy, my pace, the timbre of my voice, the prosody, the pacing, that I'm holding that place so that if they start to get lost there, they can like follow their way back, right? And I'm also okay with, so on one hand, I want to say that many practitioners I taught are scared to have the person open their eyes, like they're going to lose the flow. Now, I'm not saying if somebody's in the middle of a physical release, you stop that from happening, and we just got a good example of that. But I also want to say, in my experience, sometimes they're starting to either merge or get very emotional, and it's all right, and Carl, you tell me differently, is that it's okay to open your eyes and tap for a moment if this person is needing resources that's sitting in front of you, and then go right back in for the echo again. And I think sometimes that we forget that. So I just always want to think of resourcing the practitioner, resourcing the client, resourcing the echo is a continuum, and especially when dealing with trauma. What else did I want to say? I like what Carl said of we don't want to be scared of trauma, but I also think we have to have a healthy respect for trauma. And we have to have a healthy respect in dealing with trauma for our boundaries and our skill set. And I also love what's being said is that working with some of these larger beliefs and these larger traumas that have been held over a lifetime with repeated and repeated and repeated echoes are going to take time. So on a practitioner basis, be very careful about setting up the expectation that we're going to get rid of this in a session. Because that puts pressure on us as the practitioner to like, okay, I really want to get through this. And I'm not saying that in many types of talk therapies, it might be years of therapy. And I'm not saying that either. But I am saying that we shouldn't have the pressure of a single session, and it's inappropriate. It's not fair for you as the practitioner. It's not fair for the client. It sets up an expectation that you don't just go, well, let's just do one session and see how it goes. So we move into practitioner ethics as well as whether you see clients for a one-off. And we're not going to go there right now, but especially when we're dealing with trauma, we need to have some spaciousness and allow for that integration and allow to know that there are multiple, not only are there multiple echoes in a theme of a belief, but we're going to go in several times to a single event. So I think sometimes we need to kind of relax and take a deep breath, and that goes into everything from our pre-framing to our discussions with them at the beginning. And if somebody's not ready and aligned with that, because we're working as a team, especially with trauma, then it might not, then you have to be willing to say, no, I don't think this is a good fit. And that's really important. I think that healthy respect but not fear of trauma is a really important element. I think we're in a beautiful time, and what I want to say is, you know, from doing the Matrix Summit and working with so many also licensed practitioners, this is my personal opinion, Carl, I love that you didn't design a technique that said, you know what, let's bring in NLP and some timeline. Let's create a technique that then has inner child work, that brings in elements of memory reconsolidation and design it. It kind of came through you as a download. And in its simplicity and in that almost spiritual down-like quality, it includes so many of really the most advanced trauma techniques that are happening in the world. And that's why it's so proud. So I just also, from being exposed to so many different types of trauma therapies and therapists with lots of degrees and lots of experience, they start to find Matrix and it's like, this is amazing. So I want you to also feel really proud of the work you're doing with regard to trauma therapies, that this really is cutting edge. And the longer I'm in it, the more I appreciate it and the more respect I hear for people that have come from other disciplines as well. It's safe, it's gentle, because the quality of trauma can be eruptive, and we only want to go as slow as and to be safe, as slow as that slowest part of us can go, and we just are working with them as a team. So I just wanted to add a little bit and just some thoughts about it, because we've already really seen it done and we've seen what things can happen. I just wanted to open up if there are any questions that I might be able to answer regarding that or anything around that. Yeah.
Question about traumatic amnesia. People don't remember at all their trauma, and so
regarding traumatic amnesia, what's the question?
To know that it exists, that people don't think they have any trauma, but they go to back.
Yeah. How many people have started working on an issue and?
Well, this is where me and who came from, isn't there? That she didn't know she'd had the abuse until.
So to explain that it's possible to do something,
sure.
Just you go down, and boom, bing.
Yeah, you know what? There's something with Matrix that so involves trust. Because every session is different. You can't prepare for it. Every single one it was like, oh my God, wow, who knew that was going to happen? Or that's the first time that resource ever came up. Or that's which makes this incredibly exciting work. The traumatic amnesia, in speaking about for example, the gatekeeper echoes that Carl was mentioning yesterday, I believe, and it's been my experience, that experiences show up that the person on a deep level feels safe enough to reveal. So to force it before that, it's like, isn't there a time? They're not going to bring it up unless at least they are feeling like they're ready to begin exploring that. And so, the way that we dissociate, the way that we compartmentalize, the way that we put aside for our own survival, because if I feel that if I bring this back out, I'm going to be so overwhelmed, I'm not, on a survival level, I'm not going to make it through if I have to start feeling this all the time, then I'm not going to bring it out until it's feeling like I'm resourced enough, safe enough to be able to bring it out. The one other piece I wanted to add, and just briefly, that does everybody know at least a little bit or heard the term memory reconsolidation? Okay, and not so much, so I'll just mention it. So at the most cutting edge work regarding the working of traumatic memories, Bruce Ecker is doing some beautiful work, and when we look at what it takes to transform our relationship with a traumatic memory so that it's not an issue that has its ongoing physiological side effects, and so many of the psychological ones as well, when we look at what it takes to truly transform and eradicate the traumatic part of an event, it is beautiful in Matrix. It's a three-step process. And when Bruce talks about it, it doesn't really matter the technique per se, because lots of different therapies can do it, but it has to include these parts. And tell me if you don't think that this was like made for Matrix. When we take out a long-term memory, I kind of think of it as a file cabinet. We took it, we put it in the file cabinet, we put it 2 floors down into the basement, below the basement, below the basement in a safe, right? Because we are not ready to be dealing with that and have that out here all the time. Well, when the time is to work with that and we bring it back out and we unzip that file and we put it out in front of us, then that starts to, when we start to remember a specific event, that's the first step that's required in transforming and doing memory reconsolidation and changing the felt sense of how our relationship is to that, the belief associated with it, the feelings, emotions associated with it, the physiological sensations associated with connecting to it, that when we bring that back out, that's step number 1. So we're recalling a traumatic memory. Does that happen in Matrix Reimprinting?
Yes. Yeah.
That's what we're doing all the time. What we also love about it is, am I bringing out all the times that, when we're doing Matrix, are we doing all the times that? not in one moment. We're doing one at a time. It needs to be specific. It needs to be singular. A singular memory we can transform. We don't transform 40 of them at one time. All the times that I felt abused, all the times that I felt neglected, even though I have all this neglect, right? We see this globalization, especially with some people doing tapping especially. It doesn't happen in matrix reimprinting. It is a specific event. So that's step one. Step two essentially is we have to create what we call a mismatch or a juxtaposition experience. That's the language, but think of it as the opposite. Think of it as, what are we doing in Matrix? We're, first, eliminating the Uden aspects. It's no longer unexpected because we're there like talking about it and dealing with it. It's no longer dramatic, especially if we diffuse the color and the sound, and it's less dramatic. It's certainly no longer isolating because, let alone, you're there with your echo. No resources? Well, I'm sorry, that's all we're doing in Matrix Reimprinting is resourcing. So when we eliminate the Uden trauma quality, we've now gotten rid of the trauma aspects, and now what we do is in our resourcing and all the work that we're doing in Matrix is we literally are finding out the belief, the feelings, all those things, and we're creating equal and opposite. That mismatch. In other words, this can't be true if now this is how I feel and this is true. Actually, I have understanding. I'm looking at it through a new lens. I have totally different feelings. I'm looking at myself differently as an echo. So we're creating this juxtaposition experience, this complete opposite where both can't be true anymore. Not if we do a good job here. So that's step two in memory reconsolidation, is the different ways, and in MR it's obvious how we're doing that, creating that equal and opposite experience of what was held for so long to be this way. Step three, rinse and repeat, except without the rinse. Repeat, right? So in other words, we need to now ingrain it as so. How do we do repeat? Well, first we do testing. We open our eyes, we go back in, we retest it. How's he doing now? So we've recreated within seconds, within a minute, we've now recreated a repetition of that new paradigm, so to speak. When we start to look at the homework that we're doing, what are we having them do every day for 21 days? Repeat, reimprint. I also have them, excuse me, because the science shows that we have that 4 to 5 hour window, so I especially look at, within that next 4 to 5 hours, them going there again and reimprinting. And then continue each day after that. Continues bringing it back up, continues reimprinting, strengthening. Just imagine, like when I draw out like the neural connections, just thickening and thickening and thickening, and making that new picture the truth for us, right? And then it even evolves as the picture emerges and changes and evolves over time as we keep working with it. That I'm sure many of you have just experienced just in the last few days. Those are the three essential steps of memory reconsolidation, right? Bring the picture to mind, create an equal and opposite experience, create that, solidify it by repetition. So if I were to tell you the most cutting-edge therapeutic neuroscience and memory reconsolidation you're already doing with matrix reimprinting, give yourself a hand, right? And so I want to thank Carl for being the vessel of the download of the most current trauma technology available without completely knowing what you're doing, and it kind of unfolded in itself, which is just a beautiful origin story that I'd love to share. So any other questions that you'd like to ask about that? Yes?
I have two questions. I like what you just said about, you know, when you have your clients reimprint, that you actually say, bring up the memory again, and then, so rather than, because for me, the memory has changed.
Yes.
Right? So I'm bringing up the good memory?
It's a good question, and so I would say a few things with that. Number one is, I think we don't need to be scared about my perception. If some people's like, oh God, I don't want to bring up the old one, right? And there's almost fear around that. But it's going to have evolved however it is, even how you remember it the old way. And you're creating that you know, it's like, God, I thought about it like that, but no, this is really what's true, so I don't think we need to be scared about that. But ultimately, reimprinting is evolving and strengthening that new methodology, right? So that's what I would say. For some people, they like to actually kind of draw the before and after picture, but it so much starts to become a way that we see it that the reimprinting, I think, has the neurology already built in of how we used to feel it, and it just is kind of the way that I look at it as a synaptic connection that's just getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker until it doesn't longer exist. But like Carl said, there's also so many aspects to an event that some would say, you know, for example, you know, whether it's an airplane phobia or somebody been in a natural disaster, it's almost as if over time it just keeps getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner, so less and less things can trigger us. And it's why it's so important to go into memories more than once, because there are aspects that weren't necessarily covered in the first time that we just jumped into the scene and worked with it. So I just want to re-emphasize the importance of that. Yes?
Just on that note, because it hasn't really come up in the last second. Sometimes in the testing, people can see what I call a split screen. So they see the version of the old and then the version of the new. So what I'll get them to do is automatically go back into the older version, and there's always another belief, another emotion, or another something else, another aspect there. So just for a quick example, there's a lady who...
So I just don't know if you're being recorded, so I'll just repeat that for a moment. So just very quickly, Caroline is talking about sometimes what shows up as a when she does testing with somebody, is a split screen version, where what kind of shows up is kind of the old version, but then the new version, and then you were going to say what you do.
Yes, so going back into the old version,
Mm-hmm.
and there's always some aspect there to be dealt with, another belief. That needs to do a bit more tapping as well. So can I give you an example?
Yes.
There was a lady who I worked with who was having an affair with somebody. She was a breastfed. It was all guilt around that relationship that was happening. So we worked on that for the re-imprinting. Then when she went back, when she looked at it, it was a split screen. And what it was he always made her pay for it. So we went back in, he paid for it, she came out, and now it's all a new version.
Great. So, I mean, basically, Caroline just told a story of the importance, rather than going to the details of the story, of a split screen. But the value, I would say, that she offered of the split screen is often when they go back and they see the old part, what they realize in the old pictures is that there's still another aspect that wasn't covered, that elucidated the testing, just like in EFT. Testing helps us to show what's not yet complete and what's left to be done. So not to be scared of that past picture and bring up the new one.
And that the split screen tends to happen when you've gone somewhere else. Because in the memories where you just allow the completion, then you start from one memory, but it's the new memory.
Okay.
Yeah. Susie, for example. Are you still here, Susie? Yes. She goes. Susie, look at the school yesterday and trapping your fingers in the door. Can you see that memory? Is it still there?
No, she's
What
in
do you
her
see
classroom.
now?
She's in her classroom with her dress on.
But go back to the...
Well, before she went in,
Yeah. What do you see?
I can just see the door being held open by the little girl.
See, that's the saying, because it's still... That memory is just a new memory. You can't see the original memory. But
I
sometimes...
can imagine what it would be like, but it's not a memory, it's an imagination.
Consciously you know,
Yeah.
but subconsciously it's changed, and that's,
Yeah, it's very
subconscious,
positive.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's saying that, that's why if we can use the old memory and just get what we need, do that. But at times we can't. But then you have a split screen, and like Kyle says, and sometimes if that's still resonant, it means that there is definitely something to go back in and do.
And there was a beautiful simplicity to that moment of the shared story of the door and how it was as it transformed for you. It may not have had a lot of aspects to that one, and now it's clearly you could still go back to the old memory, but the first instinct is to go to the new one. That's what comes up first, and the more that it shows up for you, and the stronger that gets. And then the meaning, of course, the result of it. So, anyway, just a little piece. Yes, quick question.
If we're asking them to re-imprint as homework for 21 days,
Mm-hmm.
tell them we don't work with them on something else during that 21 days.
It's a good question. So I'll respond, and Carl, please. Yeah.
So they might come in.
So the question was basically, okay.
Yeah. So they might come in 7 days later, and you do some more work, some more memories, and you get another memory. So you can use that one as well. It's still the same theme. So they can mix it up. They can have 2 or 3 different memories. And one day they might use that one, or in the morning use that one. It doesn't matter. To me, as long as they're doing the re-imprinting every day, is the key thing.
Yeah, I hear. So I hear what you're saying. Is it my interpretation? If it takes 21 days to create it, but now you did the first memory for 7 days, and then you saw them in a week, and now they're doing B memory re-imprinting. It depends how often you're seeing your person, and I really don't think it's a problem to ask them to re-imprint too. right? So in other words, you may have them, again, reimprinting could be as simple as a minute or two. Literally close your eyes, reimagine that scene, bring that in through the butt. I mean, it could be, certainly you can luxuriate in the 5 or 10 minutes of the felt sense. And I'm not going to say that's wrong, but I also try to keep my homework very simple and doable. So I would say, you know, even if it's a minute or two to do that, I would do that. And certainly you're welcome to spend more, and that gives them freedom to have some depth with that. And there was one last question, and then that's it, because I know we have time.
Okay, my second question was about, I'm interested in the traumatic amnesia. So would you talk about any situations where you're going into something and you're expecting maybe a small T trauma to show up, and it's actually a big T trauma that no one knew was there, kind of thing? Or do you ever have a sense that, I think there might have been some abuse, or I think something here might have happened, and how you approach that?
Okay, so number one, carefully. Number two, I never force. I sometimes have gut instincts like, I know there's something there. Me, personally, I don't till they bring it up, or I may ask open-ended questions. So I personally have always felt the pressure from, can you see that? Is there a time that, and as soon as I start to feel that kind of expectation, I freeze up, I shut down, my frontal cortex, I mean, I just shut down. So I truly believe in the power of open-ended questions. You know, I have a sense that maybe there's something before this. Are you aware of anything? So I tend to have really gentle, lobbing, open-ended questions. If somebody has traumatic amnesia about an event, I don't know it exists. They don't know it exists. So I trust the process, just like Carl was talking about that. Is there an earlier time? If they say no, what am I going to do? Surely there must be, right? That's going to create rapport, right? So I just trust in that timeline, that day, that's as safe as they felt. And the success of that session allows the next session for them, their subconscious, to get a little bit safer and go, you know what? I don't have a lot of details about it, but I keep having this feeling like it goes back even further. Great, let's explore that. We take it as much as we can. So
I honestly believe every single person has these hidden memories, because the 0 to 6 is all into the subconscious. So it's all in there. And we just block it out as children. So everybody does that. It's just some of the stuff is bigger than others.
That's what I mean.
Right.
In a big T.
But if you step on a landmine, the beauty of the big T, the trauma resolution protocol is fast forward to the end.
right.
And work on the end. And even if that's all you do in that session, and that's beautiful, because they know like the resolution is there. And then you can go back if need be on the other bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But that happens all the time with me. I think I attract that, and I just go fast forward to the very end. It's done. And that's
And it's a great entry, because what happens if all of a sudden that shows up near the end of a session? Or, I mean, you can't control that, right? I mean, the illusion of control is very clear here, right? So we do our, so, you know, I come back to, and I'll just end with this, is number one, as a practitioner, we're always doing the best we can with the resources and skills and knowledge we have, which will forever be progressing and changing. So beating ourselves up that we didn't know better, we didn't know what to, we did the best we could. If we hold clear intention and space for their greatest and highest good, it allows us out of our judgment whether we're supposed to live or die or get over, you know, all those things, we're holding space for that. And so as long as we, you know, we hold our boundaries, we don't stretch beyond what we feel comfortable and safe doing, right? That's always a sign of I'm overextending myself, and that's where things go wrong or problems happen. And we, you know, whether you pray, trust, have faith, whatever that is like, I'm just holding space that I'm going to be able to handle whatever holds up in the session because I'm here. And I trust that what's meant to show up here shows up here, that I can hold the space for that. And I just want to say is, what I always say the difference between EFT and Matrix is EFT is like this and like this and like this, and it's a beautiful technique, and the practitioner is doing more things. And in Matrix, it's kind of like, the more skillful, the less you do as the practitioner. And the more you're holding space for them to do their own healing. So I ask lots of open-ended questions, and I allow for lots of space rather than jump in and add and direct them that way personally. And that way I can also breathe deeper, that I didn't have to figure out the right question, the right direction. It's like I'm holding that space, and no, let's not go, no, let's go back here. So it's really more like that. And then just getting used to the questions and the process and allowing it to unfold, because it's never going to be the same. Yeah? Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks